Alright, in this video I'm going to be tying Tom Loving's shad fly. This fly is part of the Pfeiffer collection, and Tom Loving is probably considered one of the fathers, if not the father, of shad fishing on the fly, and started creating dedicated patterns for shad sometime back in 1923 or 24, and this was one of his favorites. It's a pretty neat fly tied on a double salmon hook, which I have in the vise right now. That is a partridge of Redditch size 8 double salmon hook. I'm going to be tying this fly with Uni-thread 6/0 in black, and I'm going to go ahead and lay down my thread about a hook eye back from the eye, and I'll say a normal hook eye because the hook eye on this double salmon hook is gigantic. And we're going to come back to about where the barbs are and trim our excess. Now for the body, the original pattern calls for alternating white and black wool, and I've tried tying this in several different ways, both with wool dubbing, with more modern dubbings like Antron, and last with sparkle yarn, which is I think what I prefer. It produces a nice body, and it just looks good. So your sparkle yarn comes in kind of a braided 2 or 3 pieces of yarn in a single strand, so you need to take those and just kind of peel one strand off of that braid. You don't need all of it. So I'm just going to kind of split my yarn here and pull out a single thread or strand for both black and white. There's usually 2 or 3 strands for each braided yarn. And I just want to tie both of those in. I'm going to start at the butt, and I'm going to bring my thread all the way up just to create a consistent body. I want to make sure that that sparkle yarn is kind of tied up towards the eye, and then maybe trimmed about an eye's length away. That's about right. And now really what you want to do is just wrap your thread, and what you want to do is just try to wrap it flat. Don't spin the sparkle yarn, and you end up with a nice striped body. We'll take that up and leave enough room to build up a head, so again about an eye's length behind the eye. Then we'll trim off our excess. Now the sparkle yarn sometimes wants to fray on you. You can just kind of come back and trim those off. Certainly doesn't hurt anything. It looks buggy. Alright, for the wing, the original pattern calls for Bucktail, and that's what I think Tom Loving was known best for, but I'm tying a variation of this fly, and I prefer Kiptail. So I'm going to tie in a wing of Kiptail. And the wing should be relatively sparse. So I'm going to cut a section about that wide, grab it by the tips, and pull out any of the fluff or shorter hair. You end up with a nice uniform looking wing. We'll go ahead and tie that in. And what I like to do is kind of tie it in on the side to capture it just with a couple of wraps, loose wraps, and then lift up onto the top of the fly and then kind of adjust your wing length. And you want the wing to come just past the butt of the fly, not a real long wing. And that looks about right. I'm going to capture that, and I'm going to go ahead and trim off this tag end here so you can see what's going on. So we got a little wing on top, and what I like to do is just kind of lift that wing up and just do a couple wraps behind it just to help it stand. Just to help lift up that wing some. And then we'll build up a small head and give it a whip finish. Alright, so the original pattern says to paint the head red. I'm going to cheat and use some Danville's flat wax nylon, and I think that's a 140. And you want to build up a decent head because we're going to paint some eyes on it. Alright, something about like that. And I'm just going to hit that head with some Sally Hansen's first. And I would say you probably could stop right here and have a very fishable fly. But the original does call for eyes, which I'm going to paint on here in several stages. So the first thing I do is get a nice coat of Sally Hansen's on that and let it dry. Alright, so my clear coat of Sally Hansen's has dried, and now I'm going to paint on some eyes. It calls for a yellow iris and black pupil. So I'm just going to use some yellow nail polish I picked up from Walgreens or CVS or something like that. And I like to use different size just screws, and you just dip that in your paint, and then you just lightly touch the paint to the head, trying not to really push the screw onto the head, but more just get the drop of paint on the head to get a nice round eye. I'm not the best at this, but I generally produce something decent looking. If you look at some of the guys that paint poppers, they're true artists and experts at this technique. Alright, so I've got two little yellow irises there, and I'll go ahead and let that dry, and we will do the pupil. Alright, so our yellow irises have dried, and now we're going to paint on black pupil, and again just some black nail polish, and I'm going to use a slightly smaller just screw to make the pupil, and same principle, just dip the screw into the paint, and you just basically want to touch the paint to the iris but not let the screw touch. Just sometimes easier said than done. Alright, pretty decent looking. May have gone a little bit overboard on the iris on that side, but I don't think the shad will care. So you may want to just finish that off with another coat or two of Sally Hansen's just to protect the eye, but I'll spare you the monotony of watching me paint another coat or two clear coat on the fly. So this is the Tom Loving shad fly, and was created sometime around 1923. Great looking little fly. I love the double salmon hook too. Lots of fun.